Lindsay Moore was the very first person I saw present as a parent on the transition to school for children. He was very strong advocate for families. He helped write the Education Act for children with special needs. And he always had this one quote that I always thought spoke volumes. I strongly believe that parents working together with their schools can best meet the needs of exceptional students. To this end, I wish to make parents and professionals fully informed partners in special education. And that speaks volumes that the more you know, the more you can advocate for you and your child. Tonight, we're going to do a little bit of an introduction. We're going to talk about the programs and services that are available within the school system. What are your options and supports? Because there are many, depending too, we're going to talk about 2 school boards. I'm sure some of you are choosing the Catholic School Board or the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board, or you might not even know which school board you're choosing right now. But we will talk briefly about a little bit of the options in each. We'll discuss what an individual education plan, an IEP. We'll talk about an identification placement review committee.
What is?
And then how to prepare and get ready to meet the school. What would your first meeting look like? What would you like to bring up? And some strategies and tips. So that's a little bit about our evening tonight. But school boards and principals have competing demands. And right now they're very focused on several variables: budgeting, staffing, curriculum, testing at the end of the year, as well as your child. The earlier you start your process to register your child for school, the more potential you have to access the right supports. And this is critical to know. All school boards finalize their budgets in April for the following September. And those are budgets for technology supports, EAs, placements, everything. All budgets are finalized by April. And at that time, your child should be identified as a child requiring certain supports or options that you want in that school. Both school boards start registration at the end of January. So that will be your first process. Your first step tonight is taking this workshop so you are informed. And your second step will be registration at your home school in Ottawa, and you have a home school. So every parent here today, we can do a Google search online in the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board, as well as the Catholic School Board, to get your options of what your home schools are. Every parent has to register their children at their home school. You don't have options to cross boundary for registration. If you're looking for a cross boundary, an example would be your child's attending after school care. And that's the only reason really an address that you have for your home or the address of the child care is considered the radius for your home school. That will be the only options you have for a cross boundary, but you would still have to register at your home school and request a cross boundary. And we can discuss that more in detail later on. So we have 5 categories of exceptionalities that the School Board's Education Act identifies as an exceptional student. One would be behavior. And in your handouts that you received, this really explains in detail the definition of what that is included. Communication, intellectual, physical, or multiple. And these are the actual names they will use when they look at identification, where your child fits in. And when you look at your school support and what your child's support would look like, is a placement option. So a child would either be starting in a regular class. And in fact, I'm going to be very honest, both school boards start most children in JK unless they're going to a specialized school. Getting placements is not a common thing we see in JK and SK, but definitely a child will start in their home school in their classroom, JK, or if some parents, this is the year they're going into SK. And from there, you've got your placement options. And then if a parent chooses to do an identification placement review, and that is a formal identification to the school board that your child has an exceptional need, you're requesting a placement, you're identifying the placement, and then you have a review committee that identifies that and makes the placement a part of the schooling paperwork. And we will talk in detail why and how this supports parents and the child and the need for having an IPRC. An individual education plan is the paperwork that identifies the supports and strategies your child needs to be successful. On there, it becomes a document that they start in JK and can do all the way up to, my son still has one in grade 12. And on there is, you can meet at any time, update it, add to it, take away from it, but it's the identification of the individual plan that the educators are classroom. Very similar to families that were with us before this year, what we would call a team service plan that you had with children's inclusion. Now it would be the individual service plan that child cares are having in place. So what your most common placement options are when you register is having a regular class with indirect support. This is when your child is in a regular class with their peer group like they are in childcare, and a learning support teacher or resource teacher will monitor the child's progress, similar to your resource consultant coming in to support the educators, right? You can have, the second option is a regular class with resource assistance, and that is help in the classroom by an early educational assistant. In both school boards, educational assistants are not assigned to children, they're assigned to the classroom. So you can have multiple children with identified needs and an EA hours in there. So it's a very misused word, because when parents think that they're getting an educational assistant, they feel that that is going to be connected to their child. It is in the sense that your child's needs will be supported, but it's for the whole program, and it could be multiple children within the class, and the EA's hours could be a certain time within that classroom and then in another classroom for so many number of hours. Regular class with withdrawal or assistance, and this is when a child is in a regular class and the child might be withdrawn for assistance on language, reading, with a learning support teacher outside the classroom on a more one-on-one and a smaller group with an EA or a resource teacher. Less common placements that we see is a special education class with partial integration. This is when you have some time with a regular classroom. We see this more as children get older in a school system, where they might be in their regular classroom, partially in an educational placement, like a DD program, or in an autism placement classroom, or in a language classroom placement. And then they might spend some time with their peer group and class, for example, might be for math or for language, all right? Or a special education full-time. So that's a placement that is identified where a child might be in an ASD class, or in a language class, or in trying to think of the other placements, a DD class. So where children are removed and put in a specialized placement, and they're in there full time. So next we'll talk about the types of supports that might be in a placement or in a classroom. When we're talking about supports being offered in a program, there are 3 types of supports, which I'll explain in better detail. We have accommodations, modifications, and therapy. Accommodations are tools and strategies to help students learn at their grade level. They don't change the overall academic expectations. They just support inclusive success in the classroom. Okay, some examples of accommodations are providing
additional time beyond the given time for a task, so a test or an assignment or something like that. Providing directions or prompts with respects to the pace of the activity. So you might have a child that struggles with the completion of a task, and a teacher will give it in smaller pieces to pace the activity along, sometimes called chunking as well. Something providing subject-specific support, so verbatim scribing of a student's response when writing is not being assessed. So a child that has fine motor difficulties, the writing of the assignment might be the hard part, but the actual information they're well able to give, so somebody will write what they're saying. Accessing a quiet workplace to complete assignments. Often this is just within the classroom. They might have a study carrel with sides on it, or just a quiet corner. Providing preferential seating for a student who has difficulty seeing, hearing, or focusing. This could be, again, the study carrel. It could be a quiet spot at the back of the classroom. It could be right up front at the classroom where they can see, or right by the teacher's desk where they could get a little bit more support. Using the technology such as voice-activated computers or dream writers. As you get in the higher grades, lots of children are using laptops and iPads as well. And providing special things like large print, braille, audio discs, or white paper for students who are low vision or blind.
Yeah, so I'm just going to step in here.
Yeah.
So an example of my son's IEP, he is provided extra time to actually complete all assignments, not just tests, complete assignments. He is also has to have all instructions in writing. Yeah. And not just auditorily given to him. He has access to a computer, but in his younger years, it was more about seating and having the ability to focus in large groups. So an example would be is the teacher would have to be aware of core. If she saw him slouching, she would know that he was checking out and he wasn't paying attention. So he had a wedge on his seat or a move and sit to try and keep him engaged. Another thing we offered was he had task body breaks. And when he felt that he just couldn't sit anymore and his brain was too full and he needed to work or move, he had a red block that he would put on his desk and he had 3 really defined tasks he could do, because otherwise he wouldn't have come back. One was to go wash his hands. One was to go get a drink of water. One was to just take a piece of paper and hand it to the person at the office and walk back to the classroom. So those are things that you can look at, that, knowing what your child needs to be able to partake in the classroom. My son had very poor fine motor and couldn't use a pencil. He just couldn't work with a pencil at that time. So we had to find alternative ways for him to be able to provide the outcome needed, especially when you're looking at JK, when they look at things like dot-to-dot squares, cutting, even those skills were very entirely difficult for him.
And my kids were very similar. They started using a computer full-time in grade 5. All their tests, everything has always been presented to them in a computer format. One of the boys needs somebody to scribe for him because he can't get his information out fast enough still, even in a test scenario. And lots of different seating arrangements, being able to take a walk around the school, lots of things like that. But that doesn't change anything. All these accommodations will be documented in your IEP, and then they must be made readily available to the student. And as a parent, you can refer back to the IEP document when you're concerned about things that might or might not be happening in the classroom. So the next thing we'll go on to is modifications. So modifications are changes that are made, but they actually affect the curriculum expectations. So some examples would be to reduce the amount of information or the number of expectations being covered. Identifying 10 letters of the alphabet instead of identifying all the letters in the alphabet. We might reduce the complexity or the details. So we might say we want them to identify the first letter of their name, not their whole name. We might use different expectations from a different grade level, or use expectations that are completely different from the Ontario curriculum. So expectations that are from a different grade level, this can happen quite a bit, especially in grade 1. We might pull some expectations that are still from the kindergarten grade level. and bring them up to the grade 1 classroom so that your child is still working with their peers, but they're accessing information that's more appropriate for them. Expectations that are completely different from the Ontario curriculum might be a specialized placement where they're teaching predominantly life skills instead of academics.
So some of the service that you have now, I know for parents, their biggest concerns are right now we have an incredible amount of support and therapists from CHEO, right? So everybody has speech. If you have a speech path from First Words with CHEO as the community preschool team, or for your in-house, speech will follow your child till age 5. So the JK kids will receive speech as they have it now in the school system. That doesn't change, all right? And it's on a consultative basis after a child starts school. OT, if you have an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist, your therapist will now, and I would recommend that you connect with them, check in with them, and let them know you're transitioning your child to school come September. They will plan for an assessment in the summer to have a final assessment of your child for the school, and they will do all behind the scenes to ensure that your referral to the school system continues, and they make the actual referral to the home and community care support services that was formerly known as LIN, and it's just changed its name. So they provide all your speech, if anybody requires any nurses, physiotherapists, behavioral psychologists, to the school system on a needed basis. But your therapists now need to follow through and make sure that your assessments are up to date and the referral is done. Now, the biggest concern, and I'm sure the majority of you, some might not even have therapists yet and are on the wait list at CHEO for your therapist. If that's the case, I assure you, if you're on the wait list, I know that you are prioritized to have an assessment this summer at least. They kind of, CHEO stops doing consultative visits into childcare, and they start to focus on catching up the kids on the wait list that are transitioning to school. And so that's good news, that chances are if you don't have a therapist now and you need that support, chances are you might at least go into the school system with an assessment and a referral. So what is an individual education plan? And I do believe your handouts gave you an example. This is a written plan that identifies all the accommodations and modifications or services required for your child. It provides a record of the specific knowledge and skills to be assessed and evaluated, and these will be modifications that are in your IEP. So an example would be if you have a child that would be better off verbally providing information rather than in written testing. Or an example would be my son struggles extremely with memory, working memory. So asking him definitions is not going to give you any information because he just can't. He just blanks it right out. All right. It's an accountability tool for the student's parents, and everyone who has the responsibilities for helping the student. And it meets the stated goals and learning expectations. Around grade 8, I started to have my son attend his IEP meetings. And now at 18, because he, through accommodations and modifications, we never gave him a full load through high school. He has got another 1.5 years to do to complete his high school. So he didn't do 4 classes a semester. He sometimes did 2, he sometimes did 3. He now knows to advocate for himself and knows how to speak for himself, because at that time we started introducing him and attending his IEP classes, right? So it becomes accountability student tool for him to be able to say, I don't learn this way. This is what I need. It's reviewed annually or at the guardian's request. And that's important to know. At any time, you can request to review it and change something, especially if you've noticed that something's changed or you want to see something done. For me, it was the task focus breaks that he needed to have. We upgraded or reviewed his IEP to add that. This is continuous, your IEP throughout your child's career. I kid you not, my son's IEP is this thick. It has all his transitions in it. It started in JK and it just goes and goes. And every transition to the next year or from middle school, there's a big transition meeting and all that transition information's in there. It's a really important document and you have access to it at any time. But because the school authors it, they own it, right? So how can you help for an IEP development? Provide assessments, bring as much information as you can. Discuss your child's strengths, what they do well, what makes them successful, because you're going to build upon their strengths, and what do they need to help them be successful as well. You guys know what works for your child. So recommend the accommodations that you feel that you need or your child needs. This is the time and the place to discuss whether a safety plan is needed if your child likes to escape the room or go visit other people or, you know, very interested in leaving. So this is when you would want to discuss with the school a safety plan so you can be a part of it and it can be set up and everybody feels good, safe, and you are not so stressed leaving your child at the school. The interesting thing here is when I say parents do not create the IEP content, you can offer your input and share strategies, but the IEP is actually written with a drop-down menu. So they have these standardized formats that they put in, slot it there. But you can expand on that and you can do, I know I have, and I'm sure you have, Heidi, I've done written accommodations and amendments and added them to the IEP. So they create the content. It is their computer and their software that creates this. But you can definitely offer your input and share strategies that have worked for you, but more importantly, which worked in childcare, right? We know what worked when they were in the group care and care. So that chances are a good 90% of that is still going to be very relevant. An IPRC. Now, this is an interesting one. I don't know. Schools will tell you you don't need to have an IPRC and it's okay and you can wait for it. And sometimes you can. And I'm not saying everybody needs to have one, but an identification, placement, and review committee is a very small detail, but it creates a clear identification of your child and a clear identification of the placement you have chosen. But more importantly, the review committee, this gives you actual guidance and process for a grievance. If you have a grievance, your IPRC provides the boundaries that work around that. All right. If your child is going into a placement, so an ASD class or a language class, or if they're going to segregated school or DD, an IPRC will be automatically done to identify the placement. What's disappointing about this is, I kid you not, the meeting takes all of 5-10 minutes, and it consists of the parents, your principal, and maybe one other person. So there might be 3 people in the room. They identify and they say, you know, is this your child's identified need? It's written on the paper, and then the placement is written out in clarity. You all agree, sign, sign, sign. Okay, see you later. That's the meeting. If you're not choosing a placement and you want to have an IPRC, and this is important, parents can request one in writing, and your principal has 15 days to answer that request. right? So if you want an IPRC, you legally, by the Education Act, are entitled to have one, but you need to put in writing, if it's not offered for you, that you are requesting one. And it just needs to be a simple, we, the parents of so-and-so, are requesting an IPRC a meeting with the school. Let us know at your convenience what day and time. Simple as that. Like I said, parents can request meeting at any time. And this is a thing about an IPRC. Your child can be in JK, SK at any time. You can request this meeting. It doesn't have to happen the first year or the second year. And, you know, when you look at junior kindergarten, it is learning through play. It is literally childcare with larger numbers. You've got your educator and an ECE, and it's supposed to be full day learning through play, right? Principals may request a meeting after writing to notify a child's parents. Principals have 15 days to acknowledge your request, provide a parent's guide to special education to you, and send you a letter of invitation to that meeting. To prepare for this meeting, review your letter of invitation. Always submit assessments and documentations. At any time, I think it's really important, I need to say this now. So your child will have an Ontario records in their child's school file. Anything you hand the school to put into their children's file, i.e. assessments, documentation, you have the right to remove from their file at any time. Just so parents know, if there's a change of an assessment or diagnosis, you can remove old assessments from your child's records. Anything the school authors or creates or has, and if they say a school has an assessment done on your child, they own that assessment. That will stay in your child's records forever. Always give schools copies, never give originals. Only give copies of anything that you have, all right? Notify the principal who will be attending, right? This meeting is not a meeting where you will sit and discuss support. It's not where you sit and discuss EA, extra staffing requests, IEP strategy meeting. This is simply a meeting to identify your child and the placement they're going into.
We're going to head to our roadmap of getting ready for school. I'm going to go through it really quickly, but then we're going to go into detail about everything that happens through this process. And in your handouts, so don't panic, don't need to rush to take notes. There's also in your handout is a listing of everything you do at each period during this roadmap. We use the map because it's a great visual for the getting ready for school timeline. So right now we're in December to January, basically. So now is the time to discuss options for school with your resource consultant, with your childcare team at whatever preschool or childcare situation you're at. In January or February, you're going to want to register for school. Remember earlier, Lisa said that budgets are started and finished by April. So we want to get ourselves registered at the homeschool and then start beginning to figure out details. In February and March, you're going to start to develop a plan for the transition with your school. So that's a time you're going to start talking. You're going to learn all kinds of new acronyms, LSTs, all kinds of things like that. So learning support teachers, resource teachers, you're going to start to meet some new people, and they're going to help you with your plan. March and June, you're going to collaborate with the team of whatever you've decided to do and make decisions. What placement are you looking at? If you're offered a placement in an assessment class versus a regular class, or are you offered some support outside the classroom? Is that what you want to do? Do you want to be in the regular classroom setting for your child? July, August, you're going to start to prepare for school, start talking about school with your child, to help them pick out a backpack, maybe visit the playground at the school, get them familiar with things. Late August is before starting. That's when we're really going to start talking it up at home. And there's some other things that Lisa's going to go into details about. And then September and October, we're starting school, and you're going to be touching base regularly with the school to see see how things are going and if there's anything that needs tweaking. Some things that you need to think about are that you're your child's best advocate. You know your child the best, and building relationships at your school now, sooner rather than later, will set them up best for success going forward. So sometimes when we're advocating for our children, it can get a little anxiety provoking. Sometimes it can get heated and you just need to just chill and relax. So some things to remember when you're advocating for your child is you are your child's best, most consistent advocate. You know them the best. You know things about them that nobody else knows, and you're sharing them with the school. You have valuable information. Sometimes we can be intimidated by schools. We think, oh, teachers know everything. We know a lot too. As parents, we know a lot about our children and we can provide important information. You get to decide what you share with them or what you share and with whom. So you get to decide if you submit an assessment that you have. You get to decide what kind of information you reveal about your child to the school. Some tips are to remember to put things in writing and keep copies for your records. I can't tell you the number of times somebody said to me later on, well, what about the thing we talked about? And I, at the beginning of my journey, was not smart enough to keep things in a binder or in a file folder, and I would have to race around to the doctor to get a copy of an assessment or something like that. If you keep it all organized, it will help serve you through your whole school career. Each year when you do your IEP with a new team, you can easily refer back to the old one, and you'll be able to, as a parent, look at it and say, hey, that didn't work, but this did, and just make those adjustments so that when you go into your meetings, you feel confident and you feel well able to advocate for your child. You want to build partnerships to support your child. The school wants to do a fabulous job for supporting your child. They want them to feel welcome and successful at school, and you want the same thing. So we always need to look at it with that lens. Just sometimes they don't see your child quite the same way you do because they don't see them as much as you do or in the same light as you do. Feel free to seek information when necessary. You can ask the school about things, you can ask your doctor, you can ask other therapists, you can certainly ask your resource consultants as you're transitioning into school. Once transition is over, we're not terribly involved anymore, but we can certainly provide information before you go into those meetings.
Just to say, Heidi, I've had families call me after they've transitioned to school and they've just had a question or two, just a reminder. You know, our resource consultants will always be there for the first year of school to bounce off any concerns or questions.
For sure. Absolutely true. Take time to process information before making any decisions. Don't ever feel pressured to make a decision in a meeting. Say, you know what? Thank you for the information. I'm going to go home and think about that. I also strongly recommend taking somebody else with you to the meetings. Always, sometimes it's good to have two sets of ears to hear two different things, to hear tone, to have seen body language. That can be really helpful. Number 8 is key. Maintain a sense of humor. Humor fixes a lot of things, and it's a really great relationship builder. See your children with humor, see their educators with humor, and see yourself with humor. It helps a lot. And the other thing that goes a long way is telling someone when they've done a good job. Teachers really appreciate that. I know a couple of times I was really frustrated during some of my boys' years, and I felt like nobody understood. But when I sat back when they were graduating and I thought about it, they had a lot of help along the way. And I took time to write a little note to quite a number of educators that had helped them along the way. And just even, 5 years later, an educator getting just a quick email made them feel so uplifted. They were really pleased with that. So anytime somebody does a good job, say thanks.
Yes, and you're going to have great years and good years, and it all comes down to the connections and the ones that get your child, right? And those will be the ones that stick in your head forever.
Sure.
And it's important that when things don't seem to be going well, like Heidi said, it's really important to think about taking somebody, and I'm talking somebody objective. I know myself have had some really volatile meetings, and it wasn't because anything bad was happening. It's just that I was in mom mode and was not hearing past the first two sentences to the rest of the information they were giving me. Right?
100% true. The other thing that we have, then this is a really helpful piece of information for educators. We have an All About Me page. It's in your handouts. It'll take you a little bit of time to fill out, but it's about, first you'll include a picture of your child, and then the things that they like, the things they don't like, what it looks like when they get upset, the things they need help with, the things that they can do themselves. And it's just a really great snapshot. And it's an incredibly and helpful tool for any teacher that is working with your child. I know as an educator in preschool, a few times we've had kids bring them into us, and it's just so helpful. It helps us understand them and meet them where they're at much faster than if we have to learn it on the fly. So if you can, I would strongly recommend that. What to say about your child. So when you're talking about your child, when you're writing your All About Me page, you want to talk about your child. Often we get caught up in the diagnosis or the weaknesses. So it's really important to talk about their strengths, their interests. What does your child like? Favorite toys, favorite activities, things that they love to do. It's also really important to list your priority and goals for your child. That will help the school if they can meet them or if they can't meet them, but at least you'll be operating from a place of understanding. Describe the things you know your child needs to be successful. If your child needs a visual schedule, or they need more processing time before they respond, if they need visual prompting, if they do better with physical assistance, or they need close supervision. These are important things that you know already that you can share with the school. Other things that are important that sometimes we don't think about, obviously allergies, but fears and strong reactions. My guys, one of them was terrified of the sound of toilets. This is an important thing for the school to know. So I didn't remember to tell them that right up front, and that came back to burn me, but I remembered from then on. Things that might cause a safety concern. Are they prone to wander? Are they prone to bolt? Are they unaware of danger? Do they not see dangerous situations? That's very common. Are they really scared of loud sounds? A lot. So think of a fire alarm. So sometimes a child is really terrified by the sound of the fire alarm. The school knows when they're doing their fire drills, they can take the child outside before the fire drill happens so that they don't get scared. You need to share what you want and or expect in terms of therapy, resource support, certain types of placement, etc. It may not happen. They may have good reasons why it may not happen, but it certainly allows for a good, wholesome discussion. Other important things are strategies that have been successful. So things that you know from preschool, for example, that have been successful. Does your child do better if there's a visual for a dressing strip? Do they need certain water bottles? These sorts of things. And then if you have an ISP from your preschool or your child care center, an individual support plan, you can include that as well. And that will be helpful because that will give them all kinds of strategies there. You know your child the best. This is one piece of personal advice. Don't accept the answer on day one. I'd like to get to know your child on my own before I need any extra information from an educator. If you feel that you know something about your child that will make your child's day go better, make them be successful from the get-go, rather than having to go through a difficult situation, insist that the educator listen to you. That's really important. My guys were twins, and something that was really, really important to me was that they not sit together, because when they sat together, they fought. But you had to put them so one could see the back of the other one's head because there was anxiety. The grade 3 teacher, Mr. Sassenbrecker, God bless him, did not listen to me. And he told me in January he wished he'd read the note that I'd written about that, because that's ended up being what happened. And he could have had a better time, and my boys could have had a better time up until till that point if he'd known the information ahead of time. So just things that you think you should share in advance, make sure that they hear you and share them in advance.
So now we're going to get down to the real nitty gritty. And this is where I'm hoping to answer most of your questions that you've probably brought forward in the thing. So when we look down, and you have this checklist, I do believe, in your handouts. This was a godsend to families. I put it in backpacks for parents who don't make this, because it really speaks to all the little details. So remember, you can always, September to December, that's from now until December, you contact your resource consultant to discuss your child's transition to school. All right. The second thing, you've already knocked that right off this checklist. You've attended this information session. Okay. If your child has physical or mobility needs, you need to contact the liaison teacher from CHIO, because they will take over the transition to school for you. All right. Collect and gather up your child's most up-to-date assessments and reports to be added to your student record. So from now to December, you want to get that all collected together. I have to tell a funny story. I remember one family, this little woman, God, you know, she was a grandmother who had custody of her 2 granddaughters, and we were transitioning both to school. And I kid you not, she showed up to the transition to school meeting with me at the school with a Loblaws bag, plastic bag full of papers in no order, no sense. And it was mind blowing. And I thought, yep, speaks volumes to a family's reality, right? Of having, you know, twins again with needs, and all the people that are in your life and in your child's life. So you want to make sure you gather up all those records. If necessary, you can contact the special education department of your school board to discuss the options and services that are available. So an example would be, it'll come on, the Catholic School Board does assessment classes where the Ottawa Public School doesn't. So you want to know what's available in each school, and will your child need to be transported to a program if that's what you wanted? Is it available at your home school? Or would you be looking at transporting your child to another out of area school to go into a placement? Placements are offered by space. So an example would be that in Ottawa, I do believe in grade 1 to grade 5. I think there's something like, there used to be 27, I think, high-D ASD classes only, all right? And each class only holds 9 children. Right? 3, or sometimes even what's a 1-to-3 ratio. Placements are hard to come by, you know, and if you want it, you need to ask for it right away, and you go on a wait list, and you might not get it your first year, your JK year, your second. And that's why it's important that you're in the system, because you're on the wait list. And that's what you're asking for. You want the lower ratios, you want the specialty, and you want that support, right? For those of you who are working full-time, who will need, and this is what parents don't often think about as working parents, you will need childcare after school. You might need childcare for March break, Christmas break, and during the summer. Where is there childcare to support your child? I will disclose here right now that EDPs for extended day programs in the Ottawa Carleton District School Board for JK and SK have just been licensed, are now considered licensed childcare. So if you hold a subsidy, that potentially can be moved over to that. So put that in the back of your brain. That's something to think about. And there also, you might want to be looking at if your child, you need that, and your child's in a placement, they'll need transportation back to their childcare. All right. But childcare is often not on your radar. And if it's in a licensed childcare, you continue to have CISS support through your school age years. We support up to children up to age 12 in licensed childcare. So that's kind of nice that you have that bridge as well. January usually I think it's around the 25th, the last week of January, where you're going to see in your home school, they're going to put out this big sign outside this school, register for us, the Catholic board will have it. So you're going to do a search. You might even ask your RC, you know what, I'm looking at both these schools. What do you know about them? All right. They can't recommend for you, but they can definitely give you information of what they know about those schools. All right. So you take your child, most of the schools now, you can do your registration online, but you will need to bring in documents to support it. You can do the online, but then you show your face at the school with all your documents. I've registered online. My child has an identified need, and I need to meet with you. All right. The school board information sessions usually come around January, and we will sometimes CISS will have them in their newsletter. We will sometimes, if we get links, we share them with families. I'll be very honest, during COVID, this did not happen. And even when they did do it, it was done virtually for families. And even the tours of the schools were done virtually during COVID. As a parent, after you are registered, you want to make an appointment to meet with your principal, your learning support teacher, or your resource teacher to discuss your child's needs. This is a meeting that is made by the parent with the principal, the learning support, and the RT. And the reason you do this is that you bring forward all your information. If you are in the Catholic school board, this is the time and the place they would take this information from you, and the RT and the special education, learning education, will visit the childcare to view your child in the childcare to gather as much information as they can about them. So that's a really nice bridging the Catholic school board does, is where they will come and view your child in an environment that they feel comfortable in, very successful in. They can talk to the educators and find out what's working within that classroom for your child. If you're going with the public school board and your child has a global developmental delay diagnosis or an ASD diagnosis, they do what's called an intake. And that is done at a separate location. So once you register, they'll have you sign paperwork to say that you're going to do an intake. This intake is important because it's a time and a place that they gather information of observing your child and talking with you as a family. Intake can have your resource consultant with you. I would recommend that highly, that you ask your resource consultant to come to the Ottawa Carleton District School Board intake with you, because they can speak a lot about what happens in the child care that the child might not be demonstrating. So I'll explain how it looks. It happens on Woodruff Avenue at the Ottawa Carleton District School Board offices there. And they have this big auditorium where they have like a little classroom set up. Your learning support teacher and all the supports from your school will be there to observe. A facilitator from the ASD team or the DD team will be there to play and interact with your child. And from that, they glean a sort of a profile of supports that your child might need. In the meantime, while your child's playing, you and your resource consultant would sit down with either Dr. Pym, who I think she's doing it this year again, or another doctor for the global delay department, and they will go through a questionnaire, and it's kind of like a checklist with the parents to glean also, again, a more written document of this. From this, it deems the supports your child might need before your child enters the school system. So that's the two different ways the school boards do their intake to glean a profile of your child and the supports they feel your child might need. At this time, placement might be lightly discussed or recommendations made to you, right? Complete release of information forms so your child's team can communicate with the school, CHIO, and the resource consultant. So you have to sign a release with the school so they can speak to all your partners, and especially your resource consultant. We will also be giving you a a release and a sharing of information so that we can speak to the school should they call us. So that happens between January and February, the first 2 months. February and March, you will be called and given an intake profile date. Once your child is registered, we've been seeing them happen more sometimes between February and May. So sometimes they are quite a long time out. So don't be panicked if you don't get that call. Sometimes they are delayed and it doesn't get back because the ASD team is still working in the school, supporting programs, educators, and teachers, as well as doing the intake. Okay. If your child is attending the Ottawa Carleton School Board, ensure the special education consultant has made, the Catholic School Board, sorry, has made a visit to your child care to do an observation. So between February and again May, you want to ensure that that has happened. If you wish to consider a special placement, now's the time to inform your principal. To do that, though, you do need to disclose your developmental assessment for a placement. You will need a developmental assessment that shows the scoring, like a full-page developmental assessment that gives the diagnosis to be able to request a placement. All right. Again, applications for placements are the end of March. Placements are offered usually end of May, beginning on April. If you're offered a placement, you have 24 hours to accept or decline that placement. You only have 24 hours to make that decision. So a placement committee will meet in March to June and review all the applications. Families will be notified if the application is accepted. In March to June, you'll do a meeting conference, may be arranged to share information with your child, to discuss your child's needs and strengths, to consider any additional supports needed before your child begins school, understanding clearly that end of June, schools close. So this is your last month to have contact with the educators there, your admin staff, your principal, your learning support. As of June, they all disappear. So you might want to make sure that you do one last touch base to say, hey, just following up. I just want to see, you know, has my child's paperwork been reviewed? I've done my intake. Has a placement been recommended? You know, you can just touch base and find out more information. Your resource consultant can attend meetings with you. She can't call a meeting. She can't lead a meeting, but she can definitely attend with you. And a great way to bring her in is to have her take notes and to be there as a person that supports you as an advocate. If you are in the Ottawa Catholic School Board and you want to bring your resource consultant, you need to let them know in advance, because they are required to have an equal position as a resource consultant attend that meeting as well. So your resource consultant cannot attend unless they have an equal person in this position of an RC similar that's in this Catholic School Board attend the meeting as well. All right. May to June, ensure if you have therapists that your therapists have referred you to the community and care. That used to be the LIN, that their paperwork is done. They've updated assessments because they knew your child was going to school. And that assessment information is the most recent that will be going to the school. Again, if you do not have therapists, don't panic, because come July and August, there is a real crunch on with CHEO to hit that wait list, to hit all children that are aged to go to school in September. Okay. If you get planned pre-visits to your school in March or June, it's a nice time when you do register or you have that meeting to ask them if you can bring your child to tour the school, just to look around with you, to view the classrooms that are open and set up, just to visit. Usually they do allow it. Sometimes they won't if it's too busy, but they have allowed families to do a view of the school. And at that time, you can bring your All About Me book as well. Ask the school to prepare a personalized I'm going to school album. And I have had learning support teachers do this for a couple of children that I have supported in the transition to school, and it's been absolutely wonderful. They have taken photographs of the classroom, the bathrooms, the gymnasium, all the places your child might access, that have a picture of their desk. So it's a social story that you can have through the summer that talks about, I'm going to school and this is what my new school looks like. Chances are you won't get a teacher's name. Sometimes they do. You're very lucky. They will give you a teacher who your JK teacher will be. But at least if you can have an idea of the classroom, the playground, the entranceway, that the child can go through it all through the summer, every week, to say, I'm going to school and this is what my new school is going to look like. And it's not going to look like my daycare, and my daycare teachers won't be there. That's important because it's a big transition for the children. July and August, visit and explore the school property. Take the time to go use their playgrounds, walk around it, play in the kindergarten yard, take pictures and add them to your child's album that they have of I'm going to school. Videotape your child engaging in different activities so you can share the most complete picture with your school staff as well of what they're doing successfully come August. Because a lot of change, what we see in June, and when children go to school in September, so much growth happens in that time period, and so much language development, so much more skills come. So it would be really nice to have a little bit of an update for the teachers in the school. 2 weeks before your child starts, practice your new routines, all right? So a big difference for JK kids is they bring their own lunch. They have a lunch bag. And they have 2 nutritional breaks. They have to learn to pace between 2 meals. But most importantly, and a lot of parents have them practicing opening and closing their containers in their lunch bags. All right. And if your children have fine motor difficulties, find the containers that best support them to be able to independently open and close and zip up their lunch bags. They are sitting down, and quite often it's a short period of time. And if your child is really struggling to open that, they are losing time of your nutritional snack, and then they come home with all their food, right? So it's a good thing to start practicing that routine. If your child's getting on a bus, start practicing more getting up and walking to the bus station to say, this is the bus stop where we're going to catch our bus to go to school. All right. Confirm transportation arrangements. So the 2 weeks before schools open, admin staff come in. You can phone and check in to make sure that your child's transportation is confirmed, especially if your children are on specialized vans or specialized transportation, because being on a bus is just not safe, or they wouldn't know where to get off, because there's nobody on that bus that's going to say, this is your stop, right? My oldest daughter has not an identified need, and yet 3 times in JK, she never got off the bus, or she got on the wrong bus. You know, it's just a really daunting thing that happens, school buses, right? Confirm your before and after school care. Ensure that you have set that up over the summer and that's a go, that they will be going to the after school care, or if they only going to attend before school care, PD days, March break, Christmas break, and summers. Visit the school, meet teachers, so your children will have, parents will be able to come in on a day, on a staggered entry day with your child. Come meet your child, visit the classroom, cubby, washrooms, gym, library, main office. Take lots of pictures on your phone, because that will be a great way if your child is having anxiety the first 2 weeks. If you have new updated pictures of their exact classroom, their exact toilets, it's great to be able to create, again, another social story that supports this routine and change for them. It might look very different than it did the year before, especially if we have new staff in. All right. And your child can help you make my big girl school, big boy school. Once your child begins school, inform your child's school of your desire to participate in the development of an IEP. If you have an IPRC is desired and a request is put in writing, this can be done anytime throughout the year. Once an IPRC is in place, every child with an IPRC will have their IEP developed by October for every school year, all right? Those that don't, it can, doesn't mean it's not done. Quite often it is done by October, but it can, it can be done after. If they are really heavy on IEPs that year. The IEP meeting is something that you can question and ask about and when it's going to happen. And the nice thing about an IEP is if you have chosen as a parent not to disclose your child's diagnosis, you can still request an IEP. You can have an IEP without a diagnosis. You just, as a parent, need to identify what they need to be successful. All right. Anytime, build relationships with school staff. I was very fortunate. I worked nearby. I worked part-time. I did healthy snack. I came in, supported other children in the class that needed support. I did lice checks too. I did that one too. But build relationships with your school and your staff. Become a very common face, name, and person in your community school. Parents are always welcomed. Parents who build relationships, even to this day, I still see educators, and it's a very positive experience because I became a big part of my child's school. At any time, schedule meetings when you need them. If you're unclear, ask to speak to your educator, set up a meeting so it's done in a way that you can both sit down and have conversations. It's not done what I call hallway conversations. Those are very difficult, and often we don't have context of either part of the conversation and what's happening in the educator's day. They might be busy, stressed, and they don't give you the time or the information that you wish to hear. Always feel free to discuss your concerns and in a way that you feel that it's just a concern. It's not a judgment, but I'm really worried or I'm really concerned. And I know you're trying, but I'm really feeling worried, right? And celebrate the successes. When my son finally learned phonics to identify the letter A, he was in grade 1. And it was through Jolly Phonics, through an adaptation that they brought in. It was such a huge success. And it was not my idea. It wasn't my strategy. It came from the educator who really passionately put this forward. So when it was time, like Heidi said, I did do a big thank you note and a little gift to thank her, because I knew how important that was for me as a parent to have my child reach that milestone that he was able to identify the ABCs, right? So that is a bit about the schedule that we have. You guys have this in your handout. It's great to keep month by month, just to know what's to expect, because this is going to fly by. I know it's Christmas now, Hanukkah, but trust me, September comes and January comes and you're going to look at your child and think, way too young to go to school. Why am I doing this? But a lot happens between January and September. And here's another piece of advice. You don't have to follow through in September. You can register, have everything lined up, and decide September, I think I'm going to just wait and do a January intake. Parents have choices. If you're not feeling 100% comfortable on day 1 of school, that's your choice. But I would suggest you load up. It's like lawyering up. You go at the get-go from January, and you just load up on all the best supports you can for September, and thinking that you're going to start school in September. And again, as a family, having your discussions with your RC and where you're at. Again, anything that you're looking to, if you're looking to add strategies around some of the strategies that you've seen work successfully in your consultation notes, if you follow any of our social media, our YouTubes, where we demonstrate very strongly in very concrete and visible ways strategies that are working, in our newsletter, example would be self-regulation, calm down area, body breaks, sign, all the things that you feel might be needed for your school. Take the resources off these websites and bring them to the schools, because sometimes just the visual of heavy work. This is a visual of what my son needs during the day. He needs the opportunities to do some pretty heavy work to be able to sit down and attain for your 45-minute instructive circle time or your cutting time. But before that happens, this is what he will need. All right. So these are wonderful resources out there. We have Inclusion Ottawa Instagram and Facebook page, which often has strategies and tip sheets on it. We have our library that is got a wonderful book that it's Advocating with Less Tears, I think it's called, Advocating for Your Child with Less Tears. So that's in our library in the transition to school. Lots of information. YouTube channel is one of my favorites. I often put those links into my consult notes because they are so beneficial in giving visuals. And the newsletter is online.ca, and there's a search bar, and you can search any article, any strategy as well to bring forward for yourself to take to the school. If you feel like you just want more of what was happening in childcare to continue on at the school level. So guys, thank you so much. I know this was a lot of information. If you have any questions or you need follow-up, please connect with your RC. All right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.